Well, this is the second podcast I recorded back in December 2017, but the audio quality of my own voice track had caused me to procrastinate quite badly. I recorded this podcast on a cheap microphone I bought last year and didn't really realize until it was way too late that the quality had gone down the drain. I apologize for the awful quality of this podcast, but I bought a new mic a while ago and I promise the next podcast will be way better. I'm glad to at least get this one out. Enjoy! Um, Welcome everyone to the second episode of Webcomics and Chats. I'm Maplestrip, and today I am joined by Deadwombat.
Hello, I'm Deadwombat, Australian consultant. It's like 1 a.m. How are you doing?
Yay! Cuddlefish.
Hi! I'm in America, so it's 10 in the morning, and it's a weekend, so I had to wake up early for this, so you better make it worth it.
Time zones. And Donym.
I'm also an American, and I read way too many webcomics.
That's good. Then you're in the right place. Today
Yeah,
we're going to talk about Material Girl, a webcomic by Hardgear that was published on DeviantArt in like 2008 and 2009. Any one of you wants to describe what Material Girl is about?
I guess
Yeah,
I'll do like a quick
you
one.
can.
Since I was the one to suggest. It's a very interesting sort of cross-dressing bondage comic about a kid.
It's a comic where you really have to start reading into things. I normally read through everything and take things very literally for stories, but this one makes me be interested in reading deeper.
Yeah.
I started
That's,
off my first reading very literally, so I didn't get the
Same.
same.
Well, the first time I read it was like 4 years ago or something, or 6 years ago, I have no idea. A long time ago for me. And I just took it entirely literally, and the ending was a bit confusing
Yeah.
because of it.
Yeah, I was talking
Because-
to Lynn like a few weeks ago, and like I found it interesting that you could get such a different interpretation out of it.
Yeah, because every time I read it, I get something different out of it. Well, I've read it 3 times now, but it's a good webcomic. So what it's about is, well, basically it presents itself as this boy named Noah who gets cursed by a homeless gypsy woman, and when he gets home, his sister's old clothes closet basically attacks him, and all of his sister's clothes start putting themselves onto him.
Yeah, they start.
How would I even describe it?
They start forcing themselves onto him to try and.
Yeah.
And
They then force him to start going through life presenting as a girl, which
Yeah.
was very strange reading through it my
Yeah.
first time, until I realized that there's probably symbolism for metaphor, and it's not straightforward.
Possibly, yeah, because that's something you really got to talk about with this comic, the symbolism.
Yeah, the whole point is basically that it's unclear, at first at least, or in some part, it's unclear whether the clothes are actually sentient or if it's all just in Noah's head.
Yeah, it likes to play around with that a bit too. Like some parts, it does try and blur the lines quite a bit.
Yeah, at one point there's a character who literally says that Noah is repressing his gender identity, and then that strip ends with him saying, "Oh, by the way, when did he learn to do ventriloquism? When did he learn to?"
Yeah, the
That was a therapist, wasn't it?
Yeah.
therapist. I guess like what some of the things that makes it harder is that when you look at the author's other stuff, it can make it even more confusing because the author is trans, like the protagonist is, but also does a lot of bondage art, so
Yeah.
it can be a bit.
There's a lot of bondage going on in here as well, because the clothes, they just there's some moments where the clothes are especially the ribbon is going over his mouth and putting his hands behind his back and stuff like that.
Yeah, like even if you just take a preliminary look around, like you see a lot of bondage stuff in the DeviantArt gallery, so
I
Yeah.
was
Up it.
kind
yeah.
I was kind of lucky and missed all of that, and only saw the comic on its own without any of the context of the author's works.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
that's me
So you-
too. I never seen this artist at all. I didn't look around at all. I just went to the first comic and kept clicking next over and over again.
yeah, basically. Especially now that I was rereading it when Wombat recommended it to me.
Yeah.
But it's really clear that the author Hardgear can draw some really cool bondage imagery, especially because Noah looks really panicked in some of the pages where he's being attacked by his clothes, by his sister's clothes.
Do you want to talk about the art style real quick? Like, what do you think of it?
I really love the art style myself. It's pencil art. It's all fairly simple. It's very inspired by Calvin and Hobbes, but a bit more detailed than that.
Well,
It's,
that's
very
why.
smooth how detailed it is.
So that's why it looks so familiar. Every time I've been trying to figure that out, and it's obvious now that it's because I read so much Calvin and Hobbes as a kid.
Yeah, it's really strongly inspired by that.
Yeah, you can.
And it's-
Yeah, you can really see it. I can really see it now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is quite
Even-
fluid, and you can do a lot of nice, really shots rather simply, which is good.
Even the first comic says, like, the plot itself was inspired by Calvin and Hobbes. There's a bit in one of the, like at one point in Calvin and Hobbes where he is attacked by his own closet, and that just ends up with him wearing completely mismatched clothes. But the author says on the first comic that he read that bit and was inspired to make this beautiful little thing. So
Yeah.
Interesting.
Basically, it says here, inspiration, Bill Watterson. Among many others, I am a Calvin and Hobbes fan. While browsing Homicidal Psycho Jungle Cat, beautiful title by the way, that was what I said by the way, I came up with an idea for a story arc, and here we are. It's funny because originally the idea was that it would only be 30 pages, but it ended up being 86. So,
That's still super short for a webcomic, especially one this good.
Yeah,
we should have probably started out with that, like, we're gonna talk about spoilers here, but it's really short, so check it out before. It takes about an hour to read.
yeah, maybe 2 if you're busy. Like,
I read it in 3 hours yesterday, and that was because I read all the commentary and spent like 10 minutes looking at every page, but it's all really short, yeah.
It's usually
quite
about
digestible.
3 to 4 strips, well, 3 to 4 panels per strip, about 86 strips, so it's very short.
There are
Later on, there are a few Sunday comics, so to speak, where it's just a whole page.
then there's like a bit of bonus art and a few like epilogue strips as well. So.
Yeah, it ends with a few, it's really beautiful, it ends with a few Polaroid pictures about how the story ends. It looks a lot like the credit screen from a video game.
Yeah, and there's also like 2 continuation, I guess, comics like about years later, like at the very bottom of the folder.
Oh, I missed that.
I don't think I've seen those actually.
Yeah,
It did say at the end that there would be more, but
yeah, there's like if you go to the bottom of the DeviantArt folder, there's 2 sort of like gag-a-day comics that sort of seem to be set much later.
I'm also just coming across like a Material Girl dress-up game.
Yeah.
I only read the comic itself, I didn't know there was anything else beyond that.
I know, yeah.
Now I'm interested.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff here. Yeah, damn, these clothes are pretty. Some Lindy Hop coloring, and there's a lot of stuff here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the catwalk one has a lot of interesting coloring. Like midway, like a little bit down.
So yeah, some live webcomic reading right here.
Yeah. This is a well-researched podcast.
hey, I read most of it. Nah, but yeah, that's just some nice bonus stuff that I should probably be looking through before I start editing this.
Yeah. So I don't know. If you're gonna like flash up some panels or something.
Yeah, I tend to do that.
Back onto the comic
So, yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
It's really
I
nice to
had
see. There's this dress-up game, and well, there's this paper doll image. You see all the clothes that you can put on in the dress-up game here, and the clothes in Material Girl is just really nice. Really nicely animated, so to speak. It all looks like they can just move the clothes. And there's some strips where Noah's dressing up, and it's really pretty.
That does remind me, though, in the comic proper, there is one strip that's dedicated just to Noah dressing up in all the different outfits. And
Yeah, exactly.
even though he actually looks kind of cheerful in it, or
Yeah.
they.
He looks fearful in a lot of dressing up moments, which makes it even more confusing whether he enjoys it or not, or whether it's all in his head and stuff like that.
The personal interpretation that I take is that it's not all in his head, but the clothes are actively trying to get Noah to realize their gender identity.
That might be it.
That is my personal
Also-
theory.
Might be. One of you mentioned earlier that Noah's transgender, and I'm not sure if I totally agree, because it's mostly about a cross-dressing thing here, I think.
The ending is kind of ambiguous on
I
that.
feel like it depends on your definition.
Like
It is
those,
a bit
like-
ambiguous, yeah.
those prologue
Um,
comics really seem to solidify it.
I
like-
do have.
yeah.
How many spoilers can we go through? Because this is very small and it's hard to discuss without spoiling things.
We can spoil everything.
Okay, so
Okay.
near the climax.
Especially since it's an 86-page comic, so if people don't want to get spoilers, they can just
Yeah, exactly.
read the entire comic.
We've
Fair.
already spoiled enough as it is. We're too far.
Okay, so one of the big things in the climax was Noah was asked their gender identity, or if they were a gay guy or a trans girl, and the answer that Noah gave was that it really didn't matter and they aren't going to answer. And that makes me think that they're either non-binary or something like that. I'm not sure if they're a trans woman or if they're just a man who enjoys cross-dressing. It's
Well,
really
at
unclear for me.
The strip itself, he basically says, "I refuse to answer," and then, so the guy he was talking to was saying, "You're not suggesting you're some kind of androgyny, are you?" And then in the description of that strip, Hardcare also goes into what androgyny means and stuff like that. So I think it's very much suggested that Noah isn't really a girl so much just non-binary.
Like
That's
maybe
my
sort of-
interpretation.
But there are multiple ways to interpret this. There's also the guy Noah meets early on, Mars, who was also suggested to be maybe cross-dressing, or personally my interpretation of that was that Mars used to be, it's actually trans guy, but I don't know what you think about that.
I don't know.
It's the
I
only
don't know,
theory
I
that
guess-
makes.
I guess I saw him
Yeah.
as more of like a symbolic thing, like just maybe just like as a guy, because his face isn't as detailed as some of the other characters. Like, I don't know.
Or-
Plus, he literally wears a shirt with the symbol. I don't know the
Mars
words for
symbol,
them.
yeah.
The dude arrow. The dude arrow.
Yeah.
Dude arrow.
Yeah.
Dude arrow.
I think
I
think he's
works.
just a dude. Just an amazing guy, though.
Yeah, I know.
I like Mars. He's a fun character.
Mars is a really fun character. One of the things that come up a few times, well, that it's very obvious in this strip at least, is that it's just really cute when a character is completely oblivious about something. So that's the case for Mars, but also the case for like Chet, one of the friends of Noah.
Oh, Chet is
There's
great.
a lot of ditto face going on.
Yeah,
With
and
characters.
ignorance is just so adorable in this strip. It's just really cute.
I can't tell though if Mars just doesn't know or if he doesn't care.
That's
As
also a big
in,
question. It's
He might
suggested that
notice, and it's kind of suggesting at the end that he knew the whole time,
Yeah,
but
like,
just didn't think it was important
like-
enough to bring up and just wanted to let Noah figure it out for themselves and say only what they wanted to.
yeah, like
Yes, that's actually
Yes.
exactly what I'm thinking.
yeah, sort of. Yeah, suspect but don't really care either way.
Yeah, it's just really cute because one of the Polaroids at the end shows it's all about how Mars and Noah trust each other so much that Noah's asleep next to him and such. I'll just show the image in the podcast; it will work out.
Yeah.
Honestly,
that's
they're just
really great.
adorable. The two of them are just adorable.
For this webcomic, I mostly just have a whole lot of comments because I'm not entirely sure how to structure the podcast further.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
We've
Do you want
covered-
to just sort of go like through bit arc by arc, maybe? Just like go.
Yeah, that might be a better idea.
General thought.
Structure it a bit more that way. So we talked a bit about how to start it off.
Essentially, yeah. Noah passes by a gypsy woman who's begging by the road and says that he's a slave to the material world. Sort of, title dropping. And
Yeah.
curses like sort of curses him with like karma, and that's what
Yeah.
sets off this whole thing supposedly.
And he also tries multiple times to get back to. Well, he tries once to get back to the gypsy woman to get her to lift the curse, but
The clothes sort of like dragon, like
drag
for-
him back into the closet. Interestingly enough.
yeah, possibly for
literally go-
miles. Yeah.
I personally think that she did not place the curse, she just noticed it in the first place. And then just used that as an excuse to force him in, or them into character growth.
I don't think the gypsy woman had any real effects. It's more like Noah was blaming the gypsy woman for his own feelings, and
Yeah.
tried to externalize and blame something else on something he's experiencing.
It is a convenient coincidence.
If you take the more symbolic interpretation, that definitely seems to be the case.
Yeah. And I mean, in the end, he also goes back to the gypsy and starts helping her out and such to start a charity drive.
Yeah, and,
Yep.
like at that point, he doesn't seem to be interested in removing the curse, more just trying to be kind.
Which is also really nice, because I think one of the points of this webcomic, to some degree, is also just in general to get people to be nicer to each other.
Yeah, like big air tolerance, because
And not even just tolerance, but also just, realizing when you're not being your perfect self, so to speak. Because even the villain from later on, something he says, he has this whole speech about how cross-dressers are very selfish and such, and in the commentary for that strip, I'm trying to find it now, I don't have it here. In the commentary for that strip, Hardgear also says something like, this is also something that, should be kept in mind. That a lot of people in the cross-dressing community may not act that nicely towards cisgender people and that kind of stuff.
yeah, it's a very interesting portrayal of the villain that I don't normally see amongst, trans LGBT comics.
Yeah,
It's a slightly different twist on the villain.
definitely. At first he seems like a very trustworthy guy. I forgot what his name was, and I haven't been able to find it.
Rex.
I've been looking.
His name was
Rex,
Rex.
yeah.
Thank you.
So when Rex first shows up, he's like, he's basically tried to save her, and he comes up saying like, we accept you, and I have seen cross-dressers before, transgender people before, and he's acting a bit like it's no big deal, and is inviting Noah to join him to a party and such. And it also seems like he's another good guy, basically. After Noah gets beaten up, or gets in a fight with his friend Scotty, because
He's constantly portrayed with this face of like indifference.
yeah,
during that whole lead up.
exactly, and that also helps, But then when Noah is at the party, he gets roofied,
Yeah,
which
Rupert.
was sudden.
Yes, it is rather sudden while you're reading it. So
It was a bit
Heads
of a
up
shock.
if you've not already read it and still sticking through.
It was very
Yeah.
shocking my first time through just reading that scene.
Yeah, it's a bit
Yeah.
of a bit of a tonal shift, really. at that
Definitely.
point.
But I
Up
think
in-
it's for the best too, because it results in a very interesting climax.
Yeah,
When Rex turned out to be, kind of evil and tried to beat the cross-dressing out of Noah.
yeah, like he was at first was showing it as okay, but deep down he had this sort of plan going to, like the sort of scheming, I guess,
Yeah.
in the background.
And of course, at the end, Mars pops up and helps Noah out, because Noah can really fight as well.
Yeah, not really bloody takes it to town, like full on high
Yeah.
kicks and
Even though Noah's pounded up by the guys and can't.
And still under the
arms
effects
and
of the drugs.
Yeah, that too.
No, it takes like a blow to the head, like pretty
end.
serious blow to the head at the end. Yeah,
It's a bit of a roller coaster ride, especially because it's fairly short. It feels like a whole webcomic, especially because there's a lot of repetition going on, which, repetition is really useful in order to make sure that you get the point. So there are like 5 strips spread around the webcomic where Noah's just getting clothes forced on.
yeah,
Like a lot of.
yeah,
yeah.
forced on clothes or like sort of the clothes dressing him more consently depending on the strip.
Yeah. It's something in general that I like to mention because there's really a lot of repetition. This moment where Noah walks up the stairs to his home, and that moment repeats like 3 times, each time in a different situation. Once where he was at the start of the strip where he's just, annoyed, and then later on when he was forced to wear the clothes all day, and then later on again when he's starting to feel better again. And I'm not sure what kind of point I'm trying to get at here, but it's just really interesting how.
It's a repeating sort of thing, and his parents are normally at the bottom of the stairs. It's like sort of a glimpse into their reaction, I guess, to this whole thing.
Yeah.
And I do like how his parents how his parents handle it with just kind of not reacting, but then calling a psychologist and qualified people who can actually, help or get answers.
Those parents are so big and nice, by the way.
Yeah,
I really appreciate them. They don't show up that often.
yeah. Any parents are watching, like, that's probably a good route to take.
That's interesting because Noah still thinks that his parents, well, not hate him per se, but his parents feel really embarrassed about him. And
Yeah,
they,
like,
to some degree, do, but
yeah,
it's just really nicely handled, especially because, the parents are just giving him a lot of space.
yeah, which is interesting. So yeah, all one parent who's like wants to read Material Girl has and is watching this podcast. That's a good idea to take at heart.
Yeah, it's a good recommendation. Because at a later strip, actually, one of the students at Noah's school mentions that his parents must be horrible or something like that.
But really, Noah's parents are just fantastic.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily perfect, but they're very good.
Honestly, like even the school isn't as bad as it could have been, like just the school environment.
I wonder if that's because it's such a short comic that it doesn't show it, or if it's because it's actually pretty nice.
I don't know. There's like a montage bit where it shows Noah going through like the first sort of day.
Oh yeah,
and,
I'm remembering that now.
yeah, and I'm trying to.
I just
Find it,
reread
like-
that a couple minutes ago.
Yeah,
I'm trying to find it right now, but
it's a full pager, like it's a multi-page.
yeah, it's basically the first. There it is. I'll link it.
Yeah, Walk a Mile is the page we're talking about. Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
basically, this is not the first day that Noah is at school.
That's actually a montage
well,
of probably a few months.
This
Or a few
probably the
weeks.
second, but it's hard to say. But this is the first. This happened right when Noah figuratively came out of the closet.
Oh yeah,
Or literally came out of the closet.
yeah. There's a little joke gag there about coming out of the closet after Noah tries to pay off the gypsy essentially to get the curse off. The clothes drag him back all the way back to the closet at home.
Yeah.
And after he sort of breaks out, they do this little coming out of the closet thing, which, if you take symbolically, means that he's sort of maybe more.
That he's accepting it now.
Yeah,
Or
like-
maybe not fully, but that he is going to school while cross-dressing on purpose, more so than...
Yeah, he is coming out of the closet. Yeah.
And that's the moment when it starts to get hard at school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't Noah get in a fight with their friend?
Sorry?
Doesn't Noah almost immediately after that get in a fight with their friend, or was that before?
That's...
No,
Very shortly after.
that's after the second date with
It's
Mars.
the next day, I think.
Yeah.
Or well, it's kind of suggested this all like 4 days, but it might be much longer.
I think it'd have to be longer. Yeah.
It's probably much longer, but it's hard to say. It's a bit like a Disney film where everything seems to happen in a very short time span.
Yeah. Like there's no obvious time skips or
Yeah.
anything.
There are a few, there's this is the second day, so to speak, but it might be much later.
I really should know the chronology better, since I did just finish rereading this again as we were talking right now.
Yeah, but it's kind of hard because it keeps switching between scenes. There's basically, it starts with the dates, with the first date with Mars, then the first day of school, then the second day with dates with Mars, second day of school, and then the fateful night happens, right? Then the hospital thing happens, and then I think there's another day at school, and then the fateful night happens, the climax.
Either way, it's very fast-paced, a quick read, and it's kind of hard to figure out whether there's any time skips that aren't super obvious, or if the time in between is longer than it looks.
I mean, there has to be at least one time skip because they have, they've gone from the auditions for the play to at least dress rehearsal, if not an actual performance of the play.
Yeah. Like. If you
So,
take that,
as someone who does theater, I know it takes time for them to make the costume, so it has to have been at least a month or so.
Yeah, it might be. It's hard to say. I don't think it really matters even.
yeah, it is sort of framed like a newspaper comic where there is like a chronology, but it's not that strict.
And I also kind of like referring to it as like a Disney movie or an old play, the whole thing, I mean. Because the thing has so many references to like fairy tales and plays and such.
Yeah, the whole therapist.
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, that was Alice in Wonderland. Like the whole thing.
Oh, that's my favorite page.
Yeah, it's a very, I guess, a bit more emotional page, I guess.
It is definitely the moment where you realize that that the clothes might just all be in his head.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because the page after this is the ventriloquism page.
Yeah, just to keep you guessing.
But especially this visual when the therapist tells Noah to tell a story and then Noah puts the thing over his mouth. The
Ribbon.
yeah,
Yeah.
I really love that visual.
And then he sort of peels it off as he's finishing the story.
And there's a lot of bondage going on this page, but it's also just really emotional.
Oh yeah, shit ton of bondage just throughout this whole thing. Like,
And there's the closet going on. And
Just so much that you stop noticing it because you're just used to it being there.
yeah. Yeah, it's like if you're coming off of another bondage thing, like maybe if you've just finished reading Sunstone or something, you'll just slip right back in.
But I think it's also just a really powerful visual bondage. I mean, it does represent a lot of things about being bounded by your own psychology or being bounded by your family or school and society. Being stuck in your place. And the dresses, of course.
Yeah,
I mean, if you have to pick a fetish, then while creating a story, then this is a pretty good one.
yeah. In the hierarchy, the fetish hierarchy, it's It's fairly accessible.
I mean, to be fair, what kind of amazing stories can you tell with foot fetish?
Oh.
In regards to a moment
Still,
ago,
Quentin Tarantino does it, but
a moment ago you mentioned how bondage can also be bondage to a hierarchy, to yourself, to your mind. It's actually really appropriate that you mentioned this when talking about the meeting with the psychiatrist,
yeah,
considering that the
Yeah.
very next page it shows how accepting Noah's parents are, and it might be being bound to expectations of what other people want rather than what they actually care about.
definitely. And that's definitely true, by the way, that Noah describes his feelings. Because Noah definitely feels as though he's putting his parents to shame and such.
And there are moments where the clothes sort of like take control, as it were, while he's out and about to guide his actions. So that
Yeah.
can sort of lead into that.
It's a bit of his logical mind versus his emotional mind to some degree. Which is
Yeah.
why I really love this visual with Alice in Wonderland, where he just puts the ribbon in front of his mouth in order to speak his emotional mind, his cross-dressing.
I don't know
feelings.
the thing that makes this really ambiguous of whether the ribbon is alive or if it's all in Noah's head is that I can't tell if they put the ribbon around their mouth because it helps them focus and get their feelings out more effectively, or if it's the ribbon actually doing the speaking.
Yeah.
I just have no idea which.
The ribbon is sort of portrayed as like since all the clothes are sort of sentient, the ribbon is like the head,
Leader. Yeah.
the head cloth piece that sort of directly talks with Noah and sort
He
of
reminds
seems
me-
to.
He reminds me a bit of a commander in an army, especially the first page in which he's talking. He's saying he's being referred to as Sir, and everyone is following his leads, basically. All the other clothes, I mean.
Yeah.
It's all a bit mechanical.
Yeah, the ribbon is the one that gets the most personality put into it out of all of them.
Because Hardcore tries to give every piece of clothes its own personality. It doesn't really show in the webcomic, but it's, it's something Hardcore is trying to do.
It
They've
doesn't
got all
help
the
that it's hard to have lots of detailed characters with such a short comic. Ribbon's really the only one that gets time to develop their personality a lot, though the others do
Yeah.
show up and be interesting on their own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've got little quips that show up from time to time.
And the point is, of course, I mean, from the most logical interpretation, that they're all just in Noah's mind. That they're
Yeah.
not actually different characters, more just an aspect of his own character.
Is there anything
I
else that
guess-
we need to cover still?
I was gonna talk.
Um,
I was gonna quickly mention the page Drama Queen where he sort of goes on this big rant about how he doesn't deserve to be put in all this clothing and stuff, and
I
he
like
sort of
that
resigns
page.
himself. When the ribbon just shouts, "It's just female clothing."
Yeah, I really like that page because, especially from the perspective of the ribbon as part of him, where Noah's basically screaming to himself from "It's just female clothing."
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's sort of like that. It's one of those little steps in his self-acceptance, I guess.
And
where
after that,
he's-
he really does calm down.
Yeah, it's played off as a bit of a joke, but it is sort of a big sort of moment if you're
Yeah.
reading it. If you're reading it, like if you're leaving it open to interpretation.
Yeah, I really like it. I'll just go through the comments I've left. I refer to the repetition, the callbacks and such. There are also a lot of repeated panels, which is used for comedic effects, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, something I really like about the art style, because the art is just really nice. There's all because it's all done with pencil. You've got these semi-transparent boxes everywhere and semi-transparent speech bubbles, where you can kind of see through the back, and I just really like that.
The shading is surprisingly good in a lot
Shading
of
is
parts.
really good.
Yeah, like even like with some of the clothes and stuff, you can actually see like the creases in all the clothing, everything, just from how it's shaded.
Everything looks definitely like a material. Girl,
Yeah.
sorry.
we had to do one by
Everything
quota.
has a texture, yeah. Everything has a really nice texture to
Yeah.
it.
Only one. We had to do one material, Gopan.
I'll be sure to put the song in there. But yeah, those pencil drawings are just really nice. There's also a lot of really nice camera angles.
Oh yeah, it's quite cinematic.
It's really cinematic. At some points, it feels like the camera is zooming around something or zooming into something, and it feels very natural.
Yeah, a lot of the, like, forced dressing scenes, as it were, like to the nines, for example, really, are really quite fluid. Like,
It's really dynamic.
yeah, a lot of, dynamic and fluid, and you get some interesting angles and everything.
Yeah, and there's also, bird's eye perspectives and such. And it all keeps the same art style, so it's just really nicely done.
There are a few pages that sort of make things more sharp, I guess. Like, there are
Yeah,
a few.
it doesn't stay perfectly consistent. Especially because
if you go into like the bonus material, there is a lot more going on.
Well, yeah, that
basically.
makes sense. But it's also when the pages get a bit more serious that the faces all get a bit more realistic.
Yeah, just some of the bonus art is a lot, like there's a lot more color, a lot more detail, like more ink, like a more
Yeah.
ink art style than a pencil drawn.
But there's also one page somewhere in the middle which is kind of the dream sequence, which is done with ink as well. It's not really that important. Well, maybe it is. It's
Oh yeah, actually it probably is. Is it the
Story Premonition. Stormy Premonition.
yeah
Stormy
Premonition?
Premonition.
Yeah, I guess this is sort of like foreshadowing the climax of the comic.
It is, yeah. And it happens right after, the second date with Mars, so. And, okay, and the day after that, Noah gets into a fight with Scotty, his friend.
Okay.
Which is also just a really nice page, because his other friend Chad is just being incredibly cute and ignorant, while Scotty is being kind of an asshole.
Oh yeah, 'cause they put photos
That's
of
just such an adorable character.
Yeah,
yeah.
they put those photos on a board or something like that.
Yeah, like
That's also one of my favorite moments with Chet. Just like,
This one's my favorite!
this one's my favorite. Jinx.
Yeah.
Well, with Mars, I think Mars knew the whole time and knows a lot more than he lets on. I think that Chet honestly has no idea what's going on. He's just having a good time.
Yeah.
he's presented like so sort of simply, like
Yeah.
as that like you can sort of tell like maybe there's something more going on.
Meanwhile, I like to compare Scotty to Gavin from Rain, the other webcomic, which many of you
yeah.
probably know about.
Yeah, go read Rain. 10 out of 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rain is
So
fantastic.
basically, Gavin reacted a bit similarly to Scotty here at the start of Rain, at least. So that's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
interesting comparison.
Goes in a different direction though.
Definitely.
Yeah, but those first like 3 or 4 chapters or so are just really good.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Um,
back to Material Girl. Yeah.
So the classic plays, musicals, fairy tales. I made a small list of such things that Mel mentioned. The Merchant of Venice, which is about a cross-dressing woman, interestingly enough, played by Shakespeare. Beauty and the Beast was mentioned early on.
Oh yeah.
There's some Cinderella comparisons at some point.
A fair bit of Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast during the date, like with the
Yeah.
whole dancing and everything.
With the therapist,
Yeah.
they made a
Yeah.
strong allusion to Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, that one's
Yeah,
mentioned. So those kind of things, and there's a lot of historical things going on, especially the dancing with Lindy Hop and such. It's just
I guess it makes
feels-
it a bit
feels
more
classic,
timeless. I'd say like
timeless. Yeah.
It also
Flavor
helps
timeless.
with. It also helps keep this story short and compact in spite of having a lot in there. since
True.
these illusions make it very easy to make connections quickly without needing to devote pages upon pages to it.
Yeah, I agree.
Such as with
And I mean,
the
the Alice in
beauty.
Wonderland could also be like a Narnia reference as well. So
For example, earlier you mentioned the Beauty and the Beast. It really connects well to how in the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, the prince just refused to give a kindness to an old woman, and it connects easily to Noah not giving money to the gypsy.
yeah, and Mars says, "Isn't it unfair? Isn't it?"
Yeah.
He said in this really heartfelt
Actually,
way.
no. He says, like, he gives the story of Beauty and the Beast, and then he says, "Isn't it unfair?"
Isn't it severe?
Then the next panel is, he totally deserved it, though.
He probably did. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, and yeah, you see a lot of that unfairness with Noah. Like he does cry out that the whole thing's unfair a fair bit.
Yeah. I don't deserve this after all.
Yeah.
And I
But it's just girl clothing. I mean,
I've gone through all of my points.
yeah, yeah. I guess short. It's just short. You can't really. A lot of it is open to interpretation, and I think we've sort of covered a lot of that.
Oh yeah, Donym, that strip that you linked about. So Noah's going into the fight with Scotty, and Noah gives Scotty breaks his arm and such.
Yeah, the reason I linked that was because I really appreciated how earlier the whole fight with Scotty was because of his lack of acceptance, but then Scotty saw, oh, Noah's still the same guy. We even fought all this, and now
Yeah.
he changes to defending Noah rather than being against them.
Yeah, I really like that as well. I think it looks really good in that page. Nobody calls Noah a freak but me.
Yeah.
There's really nice font as well because all of the text is also handwritten. So
Yeah, like it adds a surprising amount of character to the whole thing.
yeah,
It
it's
also
varies how clear it is, but
It also connects again to what you were saying earlier about Noah's parents being great. With people are even questioning in that strip whether Noah's parents are worth anything and if they're horrible, and that's why Noah's like this. And then Scotty comes to the defense of commenting, his parents are cool, and
Yeah.
then continues on with the rest.
it's never really brought up again after that. But I think it just shows that it's really important to have acceptance, to have friends, to have people around you that help you out while dealing with this kind of abuse. I mean, after this, his life becomes easier. After all, after the story ends.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and like in the sort of few follow-up comics, you see that he's moved on. He's become big on LGBT pride and is really sort of accepted things.
All right. Anything else?
I don't know.
I think that covers everything.
Yeah. So, yeah, Material Girl. It's either a weird sort of slightly horror story about living clothes if you read it literally, but a interesting and impactful short story about cross-dressing and gender dysphoria if you like to be interpretive with it.
I would recommend that you do not read it once. Either read it several times so that you can really read into it, or don't read it at all.
Yeah, it's not everyone's cup of tea.
I think you can just read it slowly and get everything out of it as well. But reading it multiple times definitely adds to it. Yeah. I gave it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, 7 out of 10. Too much water.
7. Too much water.
What?
That's how
that was a joke. Yeah, IGN joke.
I think
God. Wind Waker, of course.
Yeah.
I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10 because it had a lot of important symbolism, which is a major part of its appeal, but I'm not the biggest fan of symbolism.
Heh.
I would give it a 9.5, but that's mainly because, like, kind of helped me break my shell and, like, realize a lot of things about myself, so it's more significant to
Yeah,
me.
I can imagine this having a very strong impact on someone. When did you first read it, Cuddlefish?
Literally a month ago.
Yeah, I think I think it can be really powerful, especially if you can really relate to Noah here.
Well, see, the interesting thing was, like, the biggest thing about it is that there were a couple really important ways that I couldn't relate with Noah.
Oh,
Like, the fact that, at least from what I got of it, it seems to be that he is definitely a guy who just chooses to present female, and, like, for a while I thought that was me, but when reading this, I just couldn't relate as well with this character, so that helped me realize that nope, I am definitely just a trans girl, so hey.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess yeah, even if it's not directly about you, you can maybe draw something out of it.
yeah, definitely.
Really, the character I relate to the most with was Mars. Just not necessarily showing an awareness of what's going on and completely ambiguous whether they know what's going on, but still nice and helpful when they
Helpful.
can be. Or
Yeah,
Chad.
And a good dancer.
Either Mars or Chad.
good answer. But alright, let's cut it off here. Thank you all for joining.
I'm glad to have been a part of this.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have had you here. We don't have a next podcast episode planned yet. I will probably post something on YouTube or something about what it might be, so you can read up on it before it starts.
Or we can edit in the title to whatever the next webcomic is right after this.
Yeah, that would probably work out, because this will take a while to be uploaded. I'm really busy and such, and I'll probably, well, right now it's like December 9th, and I'll probably do the next record the next podcast in like February, early February, so you'll see it come up eventually.
If you have any suggestions, leave a comment in the comment box below.
Definitely, I would very much enjoy that. And thank you all for watching. Thank you three for joining me, Cuddlefish, Deadwombat, and Miss Donym. And we'll see you in the next one. The next webcomic we'll be talking about in this series is Always Human by Walking North. We'll also comment upon Walking North's newest work, Aerial Magic. Check the description for more information.